Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. Today we are making a bull gouge, and this particular one came from Black Bear Forge. He hand forged this himself, so we're making the handle for it because this is a really cool tool I've wanted for a long time. Let's dive in. Today we are working with curly maple. This is a really fun wood, and it looks odd because it looks like the grain is going across the board when it's really going lengthwise. But because of the curl and the compression in the wood, it just has this beautiful chatoyancy on it. And it makes for a really nice handle because you have this interesting design that goes all around it and it changes from facet to facet. Now I want to make this octagonal, so that means we need to start with a square. And I had this blank that was around 7 inches long, which is about the size of the handle I was wanting. Maybe a little longer than I want, but that might be some foreshadowing. I'm going to make sure my plane is really nice and sharp and set up perfectly for smoothing plane, because working with curly woods is incredibly difficult and they're going to start running into problems of getting tear out. Want to find the center point on one end and then bore out a hole to fit the tang in. Then we're going to do a little bit of file work, and it was around this time I'm realizing, oops, stink. I filed that one out too big. Way too big. So when I started filing, I realized, wait a second. I wasn't planning on filing this one. Why was I doing that? I should have just driven it down in. But then I kept filing for some dumb reason and realized that, so do I make a whole new one? Or do I fill this with glue and glue it in? I really hate gluing them in. So usually when I come to an odd decision like this of do I glue it or do I make a new one, I ask myself what would drive the audience more crazy, and that would be gluing it. Or I could cut this smaller and just use the smaller interior hole that's already there, which I think is an idea from my videographer Luke. And it's a pretty good one. So we're just going to cut this smaller and work with a smaller handle than the whole thing. So we're going to shrink this down to about a 6-inch handle now and cut off a little bit off the end. And that's not a huge problem. We're just going to work with what we have. Sometimes you just got to work through the problems, and sometimes you actually get lucky. We're actually creating a stepped hole in this. You can see how there's a bigger hole on the outside, and then farther in it's a smaller hole, and then farther in it's a smaller hole again. And that will match the tang. And I want to get it close to where it should be, and then we're going to actually work on the rest of the handle once I make sure that, yeah, that's where I want it to be. I'm going to draw a circle on either end and then connect the dots from one end to the other, and I want to take a facet down until it just touches the circle. And as long as I have it clamped in there at 45 degrees and I'm planing what feels like level, I'll end up with an octagon. Now I want to make this tapered, and rather than having facets, I want it to be rounded, but to make it rounded, we actually need to start with facets. So I have this pencil marking gauge that I 3D printed a while ago. I'm going to put some marks around the outside and then a smaller circle on the end. And then I'm going to plane from that circle that I went around the outside of the handle down to the smaller circle on the outside. I'm going to start by making a square, and then I'm going to take off the corners on the square into an octagon and just connect the dots from one to the other. It sounds like a really daunting process, but it's surprisingly simple. I'm going to be doing most of it with my low-angle jack. I use this for heavy material, and then I'm going to bring in my smoother here and do the last little detail on it. For the final facets up at the end, I find it easier just to come in with a chisel. And again, I'm making facets on the facets and then making facets on those facets and getting it closer and closer to a rounded surface. Once we get to about this stage, then I'm going to bring in the file and round over all of those corners. So I have it set up on here so I have one face pointing up towards me at each time, and I'm just going to keep going around this and working on the corners and blending from one and the other until I get a nice smooth transition all the way around it. It's actually a really fun process. So you have to ask yourself, which one of these two did I make? There's something nice about a clean octagonal surface that feels good in the hand. And I want to refine it a little bit, and so I'll use some sandpaper, and that actually shows the imperfections, any file marks on there. And I can come in with a finer file and a finer file and detail it in. And so I'll hit with some sandpaper, then finer file and sandpaper and finer file until I get it really nice and clean. Then we can drive the handle down in, and most of this I'm going to do with inertia hitting, and then the last little bit I'll just set on the wood and drive it down in, do some tap carving, and sets it right to where it should be. Then we can take it for a test drive. This is a little on the dull side, but it's still working, and so I want to play with it and have a little bit of fun. And you can see how this really cuts into it. It rides on that bevel and allows you to make a nice clean swoop from one side to the other. And so you can go with the grain and then go across the grain and with the grain and across the grain until you get that nice curvature you're looking for. And it feels so good in the hand. But before we go much farther, I need to do some refining on this because we want to get ready for the finish. And I want, just before I finish it, I want to make sure everything is filed nice and clean. I'm coming in with one of my finest files and detailing it all down. And then, of course, boiled linseed oil, because nothing brings out the pop in the wood like a true oil finish. So I can coat that on there, and then, oh yeah, chatoyancy. I love curly maple. It's a lot of fun. Almost as good as curly oak, but curly oak is very, very hard to find. So once it's soaked up as much as it wants, we'll wipe off the excess, and then I can apply paste wax. This is a homemade paste wax. I have a couple videos showing how to make it. Also sell it on my website, and I'll rub this in, and it just gives it that light luster on the outside. Once I let that sit on and harden for a while, I'll usually let it sit overnight. Then I can come back and polish it off in a really nice clean surface. So let's actually sharpen this so we can put it to use and see what it can really do. I like doing several different patterns on how to sharpen gouges, and so you'll see me sharpening in different directions in different ways, just because I like to improve my own skill and make sure I can actually sharpen a gouge in several different manners. That way I can teach it. And I have several videos on how to sharpen gouges, so if you want to see that, I'll show those as well. Making sure you strop the outside and the inside, and then we can take it off for a test drive. And yeah, I'm really, really happy with how this just bites in, and oh, it's so much fun getting these light little fluffy curls coming off of this. Being able to go cross grain and with the grain, and oh. Okay, so at this point, I'm just having a lot of fun because this is an incredible tool. Anytime you have a nice, clean bowl gouge that can do some nice work and it's good and sharp, and just with the lightest pressure it cuts in, this is a very, very pleasing tool, and I am in love with this. So I have a few projects coming up, and we're going to see where this goes, because this is a fun tool, especially if you're doing any spoon carving or you want to work with small bowls. This is a fun one. So yeah, you're going to see this coming from time to time, and in the meanwhile, I'm just going to be here staring at the chatoyancy. So there you have it. This is a bent neck bowl gouge. It's a really interesting design that I've wanted for a while because it allows you to get down into things and kind of ride that bevel. There's the bevels on the outside giving you that curvature you can run on. It's kind of like, a standard gouge, but this, it's hard to get into because once you get down into the bowl, this hits and you can't move anywhere, whereas this allows you to get down into the bottom of a bowl or a large spoon, and I've got some fun ideas for this one. So yeah, I've got a couple videos coming up, and I've wanted to do this for a long time. This one is actually made from Black Bear Forge. I bought it at Handworks. He had a whole setup there, and yeah, he makes some amazing things. He makes most of my holdfasts and he makes some amazing things. He makes most of my holdfasts and my planing stop, and I absolutely love his forging work. And if you haven't seen it, he has an amazing channel as well. I'm not sponsored at all. I bought it and I really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to using it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you like the handle? Do you like the work I've done on that? What could I do better? I'd love to hear that. Let me know those down below, and that does actually help out the channel. Anytime you comment, like, share, subscribe, thank you. You're helping us out, getting us from more people and that all-powerful algorithm, as well as there's a bunch of people who just do comment down below. Thank you. That really helps us and gets us going. If you want to take it even farther, though, there are a bunch of names over here. Those people are the amazing, wonderful, benevolent, and gorgeous people over on Patreon. Because without patrons, we wouldn't exist. We are completely sponsored by you guys. And you guys keep us going. You keep the lights on. You allow me to buy weird things so I can do interesting videos. And that means a lot to me. So without patrons or members, we would not be here. If you'd like to help us keep the lights on and keep us going and produce interesting videos, then think about becoming a patron or a member. Or just click the thank you button down over here and send a little bit of money and say thank you. It really means a lot. So I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. This gouge I got from Black Bear Forge, but unfortunately it's not a very good one. It didn't gouge my pocketbook at all.